Is this okay? Okay, very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for coming back from lunch uh, for what promises to be a very interesting session. So we won't let you doze off because we're going to be talking to somebody who we know as the man who got India her first individual gold at the Olympics in the 28 Beijing in the 10-meter air rifle event. But there's very little insight that we actually have about Abhinav Bindra's journey to Beijing, or the journey that he's been on thereafter, where he's now a mentor to young shooters. He's also an entrepreneur with interests in healthcare and in sports. And so a lot of the conversations that we're going to be having with him are very much at the intersection of some of the most interesting debates that we've been having at this conference through the morning. And I'd like to thank Abhinav for actually coming here and speaking with us. But before we begin the conversation, I just urge each one of you to please go ahead and pick up a copy of his autobiography. It's called A Shot at History, and it's really a deep, sort of meditative insight into the life of a sports person and what it takes to really reach the level that Abhinav did at the age of 25. So, Abhinav, just to start off, from there, give us a glimpse into the history. Okay, I'm going to face here and then ask you because they can hear the question then. But, if you could give us a glimpse into your journey to Beijing, because a lot of us know of the optics and the big medals and the grand reception that you got at the airport and the celebrityhood thereafter, but there's very little insight that people actually have into what it took to get that medal and how you left nothing to chance.
Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me to be here. That's a tough question because, a lot went into it. When I went to Beijing, it was already 15 years into my career that I'd been dreaming of that moment. I lived for that moment. I often say that for an athlete, and specifically for me, the Olympics did not come every 4 years. For me, they were every day. So it was a daily pursuit to get better. But I'd like to start by telling you all how I started shooting. Because it started when I was a 13-year-old boy. I was a very, very fat boy, and I hated sport. I was a champion at missing physical education classes at school. That was the only talent perhaps I had. And one day I was taken to a shooting coach because my father always pushed me towards sport. He always said, son, play some sport. And one day I went to a shooting coach, my first coach, Colonel Dillon, and I said, I'll go try it. So I went and I tried it and I loved it because to be successful in shooting, you had to stand still. So that worked very well for the fat boy who didn't like to move. So that's how I started. That was the reason why I started shooting, but I fell in love with the sport, and it became an obsession. It became an obsession. I started dreaming. My first dream was to win a district competition. Then it became a state competition. Then it became the nationals, and then so on and so forth. At age 15, I already represented India at my first Commonwealth Games. And the journey just started, and it became an obsessive journey towards excellence. Obviously, I wanted to win. I wanted to win very badly. But I went to my first Olympic Games at the age of 17 to Sydney. Then I went to Athens, and then finally Beijing happened, and a lot of things happened in between. But I'd like to, since you asked particularly about Beijing, I'd just like to tell you one thing, what my mindset was when I went to Beijing. When I went to Beijing, I was very well prepared. As I said, I lived by the motto that it's not every 4 years, it's every day. I had done everything humanly possible to prepare for that event. That gave me a sense of security because naturally, I'm not a confident person. I was a person who had low self-esteem, and that was not a good combination to have in sport. In sport, sometimes you have to be good conman, because you have to con yourself every day into thinking that you're going to be great and your tomorrow is going to be a great day, and you have to, and you're going to win. Unfortunately, I wasn't expert in conning myself, and that led to a degree of low confidence. But my security came by the fact that I'd done everything humanly possible to prepare for that event. And when Beijing happened, I also had a great sense of detachment from the outcome, because I was very invested in the process, and that's what I enjoyed doing, and that was my journey.
So, everything humanly outcome is a lot of bizarre things that I never knew about before I read the book. So I'm sure some of the people in the audience would like to know what exactly that means. One of the things that I know is, of course, changing 1 millimeter of your shoe so that you get a more precise sort of grip on your posture.
Yeah, I did a lot of interesting things, some things which were not very common to do. For example, I'll start with an interesting example, because we're at Lal Raj Hall today. So the Beijing Olympic final hall was a very huge space. It was a massive hall with a capacity of 10,000 people. And in shooting, you require a sense of balance. And a sense of balance can only come when you have a sense of space. And when you're in a big hall, sometimes you can get lost. So before going to Beijing, I actually hired a marriage hall, and that's the closest I've coming to getting married. And I hired a marriage hall, and I set up a shooting range there to simulate this large space. That was something I did. In Athens, I had a bad experience, and the experience was that I had a loose tile under where I was standing. So I actually soled my shoes with Ferrari tires, because that apparently has the best anti-skid scenario happening. I did things like neurofeedback. I did brain mapping. I went to South Africa and got my brain mapped and tried to understand what my brain was doing when I was shooting well. And I tried to replicate that, and I tried to train on it. And I did a lot of things. 1 week prior to going to Beijing, since I was, as I told you, I wasn't the most confident human being. I went on a commando training course in Germany. My coach took me on a commando course, which required me to get really out of my comfort zone, because I was a chicken-hearted person, being honest. So it involved climbing a pole, for example, which was 40 feet high, the diameter of a pizza. I had to climb it, and then I had to jump off it. So that gave me a sense of a little bit of, it made me feel good that I was able to do it, and that gave me a sense of security. And I'll tell you another funny story, what I did, which you might enjoy. So I'm not a very big drinker, and I flew into Beijing from Munich. And as I was checking out of my hotel room, it was the most bizarre thing I've probably done in my entire life. I stole a bottle of Jack Daniels from the minibar. And the night before my competition, I was so nervous that I couldn't sleep. So then I reached out, then I suddenly remembered that I had this miniature bottle of Jack Daniels. So I reached out to the bottle of Jack Daniels and drank it. And then I went and shot the next day, and then I won.
Okay, and then of course, 2008 happened, but, I just want to understand your state of mind post that victory, because you do admit to going through a bit of a mild depression.
Not mild, a severe one, I would say.
Well, yeah, and in your book, you also talk about, it being some sort of a post-war syndrome. Yeah. So, what does a victory at such a young age and really hitting your pinnacle at 25, what does that do to your mind?
Yeah, so, I was, as I told you, going into Beijing, it was 15 years into my career already, and I was obsessive about winning an Olympic gold medal. I would dream about it. It was my life, and every single day, every moment, I lived for it. And then one fine day, I managed to win this medal that I'd been chasing, and I had it in my pocket. And then I was all dressed and all ready, but I had nowhere to go, because there was this huge void in my life, because I had not been able to reset my goals, and I had not been able to I never thought of my life post it. And it's very common for Olympic athletes. It's actually called PODS, post-Olympic depression syndrome. because we work for 4 years, and it's not a joke. Please don't laugh at it. It's really severe. It's intense. Uh, um, and we work for 4 years, and then we have a void in our lives because we worked so hard for this one event, and then it's suddenly over. And then what do you do?
Right.
So then it just takes some time to find the energy again, to refocus on your goals, and set things in motion again. And yeah, and now I went to 5 Olympics, so now I'm an expert in the pod scenario. I've cracked it, so I know how to deal with it.
Right, but and then you persevered after 2008, in fact, and played right up till 2016, which is when you retired in Rio. I want to get a sense of why you did that, because in your book, you actually talk about how this is a sport that can be played by somebody in their late teens, as well as somebody right up to their mid or late 50s. So what was the reason to give it all up at the age of 30?
To give it up or to continue?
Your retirement, I mean.
Yeah, I think I retired at age 34 after Rio. I went to 2 more Olympic Games. Post Beijing, it was, as I told you already, it was a very difficult time of my life, because I think it was perhaps the hardest time of my life, and I lost a lot in my life, and as an athlete, you lose much more than you win. And I faced a lot of failure in my life, but victory also comes with a crisis sometimes. And it was perhaps the most difficult moment of my life. And post Beijing, I wanted to move on. I wanted to quit. Wanted to end on this great high. And I said, now let's move on to something else. But I didn't know where to move on to. So I decided to go on a Vipassana meditation course. You go to this Vipassana meditation course, and you meditate for 10 hours a day. You're quiet. You don't talk for 10 days. And my whole intention was to seek from within, what do I want to do now? So I went on this course, and I wanted to find an outlet outside of sport. So I went on this meditation course in summer, and it was tough. And I went there and trying to understand what I'm going to do, maybe open a pharmaceutical company, maybe. And but so I went to this meditation course, and for 10 days, for 10 hours a day, when the whole meditation was happening, all I did was think about shooting. So that was a signal to me that, I still loved what I did. I still loved the process of my sport. And that's what got me back to shooting. I was still a seeker. Yeah, I retired in 2016 when I felt that I had nothing more to give. I recognized my diminishing talents, and it was time to move on. And it was a decision which I had prepared for.
And today you have a very sort of detached relationship with shooting. In fact, you talk about visiting your range once every 4 months. And
no, in fact, I haven't even been back after. In fact, when I quit, I wanted to break. So I have a shooting range at home, and when I quit, I wanted to break it down and convert it into a vegetable garden. But my parents didn't allow me to do that, because they were slightly more sentimental about it than I was.
So when you actually do go there, is there a sense of pride and achievement, or is there a sense of melancholy?
To be honest, and perhaps most of you in this room may not get it, there's a sense of pain, because there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of intense, it was a very intense 22 years of my life, because I was not a believer. I was a person who never had the confidence to think that I'm going to go out there and win a gold medal. A part of me was always fighting myself, and it was a great internal battle that I had. And when I overcame this internal battle with perseverance and persistence and simple bloody-mindedness and hard work, but because I had this kind of a negative, realistic type of an attitude towards my sport, it made it difficult. It was always an internal battle for me. So yes, I have, when I go back to a shooting range, of course, it was a great 22 years. I remember the journey with great fondness, but it was also hard work, and it was sometimes a painful experience, which I signed up for and which I owned, which I owned and which I wanted to do. So that's what I feel when I go back to it now.
Okay, let's talk about an external battle that you also had and that you write about so poignantly in your book, and which is in some sense, informed some of the things that you've been doing of late, which is this unnerving period, almost ironical, for somebody who had to depend on his motor skills to be detected with a neurological disorder. And you went through a period where you got seizures. Uh, what did that do to you, and how did you overcome it?
Well, in about, I think it was 2014 or 2015, I was diagnosed with epilepsy. And it was a very, very difficult time of my life because, I was in a sport which required very fine motor skills, which required a sense of balance, which required, yeah, and my attacks, when I had a few, and it left my hands in a lot of tremors. So I used to have a lot of hand tremors happening. And that was a big no for my sport. But I think one of the best things that I did in this period was have no self-pity. So I reached out to the best experts in the world. I went to the best doctors in the world. I tried a cocktail of medications at one point of time because to try and find the one which tried to help me and work for my solution. It was a tough period because obviously medications had side effects. The biggest side effect was the loss of balance, dual vision. I remember shooting a competition and I just couldn't see. And I ironically won the competition. But it was a tough period of time, but I think my sport was my refuge because it gave me a sense of purpose. It gave me the ability that I wanted to fight and I wanted to go to the Olympics and be the best that I could be. That was what I was chasing, and I had to face a challenge, but so be it. I overcame the challenge with. I went to the best doctors in the world. I consulted with the sports medicine doctor in Munich. I had the access to the best neurological rehab facilities, which made a huge difference in trying to develop my skills back. It was great because it was great. It was tough, but it was great in a way because I finally started to live in the moment because I never knew what the next moment was going to bring to be. So I finally started to appreciate every moment that I had. Yeah, it was an intense journey, but when I went to the Olympics, I was ready and I had no medical issue that I was as good as I could be. I finished fourth at the Rio Olympic Games, a tenth of a point away from a medal. But I finished fourth at the Rio Olympic Games, not because of a shaky finger or a neurological issue. I finished fourth because I wasn't good enough for third.
Right. But this also in some sense informed your decision to get into entrepreneurship, and you've now invested in rehabilitative centers. You also have a venture fund called Shooting Star, through which you're putting money into sports medicine, transitional health, and essentially other technologies that transform human behavior. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, so I think the decision pretty much came when I went through this traumatic period of time in my life, and I was in India and trying to seek help. I consulted with a lot of experts in India, but for an athlete, it was always you have to treat an athlete very differently from a normal patient, because an athlete always has the desire to come back to his sport. The athlete always needs to get better, overcoming whatever injury or issue that he or she may be facing, and he has to get back at a very quick pace. You can't let the athlete out for a very long period of time. An athlete's body is a finely tuned machine. It's like a Ferrari, and it requires that care and that precision in taking care of the body. And unfortunately, in India, those facilities were absolutely not available. They were not available for sport, but they were also not available for normal rehabilitation, be it orthopedic rehabilitation, be it neurological rehabilitation or preventive healthcare. So I had access to, I went to this doctor in Munich. His name is Dr. Muller Wohlfahrt. He's a very famous sports medicine doctor who's been the doctor for the football team, Bolt, etc., etc. I was very low on his VIP list, but so he had this great setup and a lot of technology that he used uh, for rehabilitation, which not just athletes but normal people also accessed. When I retired from sport, that's what I did. In 2 months' time, I had my first center up in Mohali. I have a center now in Delhi. And my third center is my biggest center, which is a center which is in a floor space of 10,000 square feet with the best technology in the world, built for athletes. And it's a philanthropy that I do. I run it through my foundation, and all elite athletes, all upcoming athletes, have free access to the best of class in terms of high performance in sport, prehab to prevent injuries, or rehab because an athlete's life, an injury is inevitable. So that's what I'm doing. It's a very interesting journey that I've undertaken. It's something which is definitely needed in this country. It comes with its own challenges, but challenges is something that I've always enjoyed.
Right. And you also spoke to me before we started off about the role of insurance in transitional healthcare, because this is a very expensive, part of healthcare and not accessible to most people. So briefly talk about, the importance of that.
I think hospitals and healthcare are generally focused more on critical care because that's where the economics lie. And I think transitional healthcare is something which is just missed out. But to be very, very honest, if you're going through an orthopedic surgery, uh, 70% success of that surgery is dependent on your aftercare. And unfortunately, that aftercare is not available in this country. And that's what I'm trying to bring this change in the system. And insurance obviously plays an important part in that whole thing. I don't think insurance covers too much of it, and I think that is something that needs to change because I think people deserve the best, and people deserve the best in its class, and people deserve to be healthy.
Right. And what are your plans to ramp up? You have 3 centers currently. Presumably, India needs a lot more than just that.
Yes, I have plans to scale up. A few of our centers are doing well. I think my big best center presently is Mohali. So things are coming up. I do have plans to open more centers across the country, and looking for my like-minded people to partner with and support us, especially also from the athletic side, from the sporting side, because sport in India needs to grow. And athletes, we have so much talent in this country, it's unbelievable. But all that talent requires the right nurturing, all that talent requires the right infrastructure, and all that talent requires the edge that is needed to go out there and win Olympic gold medals. It's the world is so advanced, technology plays such an important role. The West is just paying attention to that 1% detail, because that 1% detail is going to make the difference between winning a gold medal at the Olympics or finishing 15th. And I'm trying to work on that 1% and making that accessible to athletes.
Do you bring the same passion to entrepreneurship as you did to shooting, or are you more passive in
That's a
terms
tough
of?
question. It's a very tough question and an unfair one as well, because I don't think anything can match my obsession that uh, I had for my sporting career. But I bring in the same values to what I do. Obviously, sport has been my life. It has been my greatest life. It has given me my biggest life lessons. I do things with honesty. I do things with integrity, and I try and be the best that I can be, and try and put my best foot forward. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Abhinav, as Bhavna said in her introduction, the journey of a world Olympian is pretty much, and the perseverance that you need to win in the sport is quite similar to the kind of rigor and perseverance that's needed in R&D and in ensuring that we have the best of medical health possible in this country. What's your message to all of those people working uh, in this field, with their backs against their wall? And uh, how do they sort of continue without losing hope?
I think research and development, I'll give you a whole idea of my own sport. I was in a very static sport myself. It was a repetitive sport. You do the same damn thing every single day. It gets monotonous and it gets boring. And but I just try to find interesting ways to do that. I try to research. I try to develop things to improve my performance. And I think that's exactly the same principles when you're involved in R&D. It's sometimes a frustrating exercise because sometimes things don't go your way. But athletes are always conditioned for hope, and we always remain hopeful. And that's what I'll just try and tell them to be. Keep persevering, keep persisting, and just be at it.
You've been a champion, I think, despite the system rather than because of it. And you've spoken very candidly about the antipathy of sporting officials in this country. And of course, a lot of the things are perhaps changing for the better in India for very many other sectors. But, what's the sense that you're getting in terms of sport? And are we better equipped, better prepared for the 2020 Olympics than we were for 2016?
I think we're a little confused nation in terms of our sporting aspirations. Every 4 years, the Olympic Games come in. We don't do so well. We win a medal or two, and then there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of frustration, and 1 billion people and only two medals, and everybody is angry and frustrated. And then there's a lull for 4 years. The fact of the matter is that we need to be persistent in our planning. We need to focus on our grassroots. I think, yes, support is coming into elite athlete programs now, but support most definitely is not infiltrating down to the grassroots levels, because unfortunately everybody wants instant gratification, and when you invest in grassroots, when you invest in the youth, you might not get that instant gratification, and it requires perseverance and persistence and patience to get the desired results. I think a couple of things need to change in the landscape of Indian sport. I think a lot more corporate interest needs to come into investing in sport outside of cricket. A lot more investment needs to come into Olympic sport. I'll give you an example of the United States Olympic Committee. The United States Olympic Committee does not get $1 in subsidy from the US government. They're completely funded through corporate support. Of course, things are different between the US and India. I think the second point, what I'd like to make, is the point of governance. I think sports governance is something which needs to change in this country. It needs a boost. Good governance needs to come in, and I'm a firm believer that change will only happen when that change is mandated. People don't like change. People like to be where they are. But if we need to make that step forward, that change will need to be mandated. And I think the need of the hour is a sports legislation, which ensures a degree of good governance. And I think certain work is going on in that area. But it requires political will to follow through on it. And I do hope that happens, because I think that will give a great fillip to Indian sport.
All right, I'm just going to ask you one more question before I open it up to the audience, because I'm sure they have, lots to ask as well. But there's a biopic now that's been announced, on your life. How does that make you feel, and what do you hope to see coming out of it? Because, this...
I hope to see myself dance around trees. I hope to see many attractive girlfriends that I've had. So that's what I'm hoping for. I mean, I had a script reading a few. So my book is inspired by the movie is inspired by my book. The one you talked about is going to be a loosely adapted version, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm especially looking forward to the loose parts. So if you want to know my exact true story, read my book. If you want to see a more entertaining part, which I'm sure will be inspiring as well, go see the movie.
All right.
I don't know if I'm going to see the movie myself, but...
Okay, so we're going to open it up for maybe 2 or 3 questions. Kanchana? I think it's working, sir. Yeah.
just I want to know, you started this field of this, what you are doing. So at the age of 13 you start. So just I want to know what do you advise to children, to our children, because mother and father nowadays send to every corner, every field. They send for cricket, they send for this Ishanebari, they send for this, they send for this. So by the end of the day, nothing is come out. So how you advise at the what age the boy should be think over it that this is the final stage or he have to be simple
You
question.
ask a very good question. Uh, um, I think research and science says that when you're young, till about age 12 or 13, you should actually play multiple sports, because playing multiple sport builds motor skills, builds your physical base, builds coordination. And I think at probably at age 12, 13 is when your child could start thinking of specializing in one particular sport. But at a young age, it's very, very important that the child plays multiple sports. I didn't do that. I was the fatty who liked who didn't like to do, and I wish I played multiple sports now. If that's my biggest regret, that I should have played multiple sports as a kid.
Just a related question to that, in fact, how does one sort of hone their craft in this field? Because I know that you had, the privilege of a very strong family background, but there's a whole, bunch of sports persons out there who are really fighting against the system. So, how do they continue to sort of, keep at it and hone their craft and reach the excellence that's required?
I think I think it's an interesting question, and I'd like to say that everybody born has some kind of limitations. Everybody faces challenges. Um, I may have been fortunate in certain ways, as you pointed out, and I was very, very grateful for it. But it also came with it a downside, which perhaps doesn't always come out. And the downside was that I always had a plan B. I always had an outlet out of it. And in sport, that doesn't work. I think whenever you're trying to chase excellence, that doesn't work. You need to have the desperation and that great desire from deep within your gut to go out there and win. And then whatever challenge that you may have, be it an economic challenge or a limitation that you have, you'll overcome it by simply working hard. And that's what I did, and that's what I believe in. So people will face challenges. There will always be certain challenges that there are, and you're absolutely right. There are many challenges that a lot of our talent faces in this country, and a lot of that talent just goes unnoticed. And that's why we need to start to invest in the grassroots. It's very, very, very crucial that we invest in our youth. We invest in systems that nurture talent. That's investing in our people, and that's what needs to be done. It obviously has to be something which needs to be done at a large scale, and that large scale can only happen if it's done by the state. But obviously, the state also India is a big country with various challenges, and sport then always comes down the ladder. But I think, as I said, with also corporate support is something which sport in India needs. Olympic sport in India needs. I think cricket has enough cash. They can even support us.
Okay, one more question. Anybody? I think the couple of hands at the back, yeah.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
My question is, actually I have two questions.
Where is he? I can't see him.
Hello.
Where?
If suppose you have a chance, and if suppose there is a time machine, you go back 20 years back in your life, and if you wish to choose another sports, which it would be?
If I went back 20 years, I don't know, man. Golf, you come last, you still earn some cash. I have no clue. I was never a talented person. I was never athletic, so I don't know with what sport I could have chosen, but very tough question. Perhaps shooting again, I would labor through it.
Okay. My another question is specifically in the country like India, where the sports training is quite expensive. For example, you can say horse riding or shooting. If somebody is having inspiration, ability for the young generation, how can they manage and I mean, how can inspire you them considering all this cost?
No, I think you've answered that, but we'll take one question there from the gentleman just in front of the cameras, and then we'll have to wrap it up. Can we get him a mic?
Yeah, thanks, Abhinav. It's very encouraging and motivating to hear you. Uh, I like one sentence very aptly fitting for medical fraternity as well. You said there are more failures than success, and very aptly it is also true for medical. Uh, there are around 5,000 molecules which are required to be researched before one molecule goes into the market. So it's a very good anomaly. I'm saying analogy. Uh, what keeps you motivated to again get up and chase your target? In medical, we have patients at the core of whatever we do. What motivates you? When you fail, then again you have to come back, get up, and then okay, that's my goal. Olympic, obviously you shared, but something more like advice. How do we come back from failures? Thank you.
It's a very interesting question.
It's a very good question, and I think it's a difficult one to also answer. But I think when you fail, you obviously are disappointed. I think it hurts. You're disappointed. You feel bad, but you're allowed to whine for it for a couple of days, and then you just have to. I think time is the best healer. When you fail, you just wait, and your passion for whatever you do comes back. And sometimes failure is also a nice kick on your ego, and you can also channelize it well sometimes and learn from failure. I think failure also gives an opportunity to learn a lot, and that's what I always try to do. If I failed, I try to learn from it and try not to make the same mistakes again. But again, very tough question, and I don't have a clear answer for you, and I'm not even going to attempt it because failure hurts, failure sucks, but you just need to get up and get going again.
All right, I think with that, we'll have to wrap it up. Big round of applause for Abhinav Bindra. And
thank you so much, Mr. Bindra.
As we wait for that movie to come out, I'd again urge all of you to pick up that autobiography. It's truly inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. May I quickly invite on stage Mr. Vaidish, President OPPI, to hand over a memento to Mr. Bindra. Also request Mr. Vaidish to hand over a memento to Nikhil. Thank you so much. As they say, there is no in-between when it comes to ethics and business integrity. With session partners PricewaterhouseCoopers, we bring to you our next session